I mean, my sister and I have both had very paranormal experiences that we can't deny. So I've been a believer long before it was cool. Like my husband, we would go to like some of his executive dinners and he'd be like, okay, so can we not talk about Bigfoot tonight? Like,
the Bigfoot. Do you think that was Bigfoot that we just saw?
I think so. Well, the interesting thing
That's
about
how TMZ is reporting on it.
I know. I love it. I definitely believe in aliens and all that. Bigfoot, I believe it's something. I don't know what it is. And what's fascinating is, so my friends own Skinwalker Ranch. You're familiar with the show on the History Channel, Skinwalker Ranch. It's like the biggest scientific studied paranormal hotspot in the world.
Okay.
And that's in Utah. And there have been sightings on Skinwalker Ranch and other places where when someone sees like a Bigfoot or a werewolf, there's oftentimes an orb or a UFO. So the theory is it's interdimensional potentially, where like something's coming in, whether it's through a wormhole, which I think Einstein, this is where my big nerd comes out. I think Einstein actually was the first to talk about wormholes and how things come in from other dimensions. And when we do see those creatures that are unexplained, like cryptids, things like that, there's oftentimes a UFO sighting as well, which I find so fascinating. I haven't been able to figure out what it is yet. So the jury's out on Bigfoot for me, but I'm definitely believe in aliens.
And you think they're
and
from
I kind of have the hots for aliens, I'll be honest.
Do you think they are coming from multiple different planets or they're all from the same planet?
I think some come in from other planets, multiple. I also think some are coming in through wormholes. That's how they get here so quickly. It's like you're going through like something that like transports you here. And then I also think they're interdimensional. I think some are here on the planet with us, but it's different dimensions that they go through. That's why some clairvoyants can see things, because it's the veil or whatever you want to call it is thin for them. And so that's why they're seeing things. So I think there's multiple ways to see them. In fact,
do you believe in psychics and mediums?
I do. I think you can also be ripped off by a lot of them. I think you have to be really careful. But we did an alien party at my house on Housewives. It was amazing. We actually got UFOs on camera, and it didn't make it in scene, which is wild.
Wait, what do you mean? You're saying there's footage of UFOs in Utah from your party, and they gave it to the government? Where is it?
I don't know. That's a good conspiracy. Maybe that's what happened. No, I think producers had something planned for Dana. Do you remember Dana last season?
Yes.
Dana and I had a fight. Like, I didn't include her in my event.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize she was on the cast yet because it was brand new season. And so, because they don't tell you who they cast. So that didn't happen. I went up to her and I was like, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you were on the cast. Like, I totally would have invited you. So it didn't get cut because it wasn't relevant to an argument. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what we did was we did this theory called, it's by Dr. Stephen Greer. It's called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's human initiated contact with aliens via meditation. And they come in supposedly interdimensionally. And we literally pulled out our cameras. You can ask Whitney, you can ask Heather, you can ask Meredith. They were all there. And flying saucers were on our camera. So the producers picked it up. They were there. Producers even went and did this method on their own, like in Joshua Tree, and sent me pictures of UFOs flying above them. But it didn't make the scene. So I don't know that it was a government thing or if it was a credibility thing or what. Or it just didn't pertain to storyline at the time.
So what do you feel about this? We might have to cut this and put this in a different show.
It's fine.
But what do you feel about like The Matrix?
I think I haven't watched The Matrix forever.
I've never even watched The Matrix, but I'm watching these TikToks where people are kind of saying weird Matrix things that have happened to them.
This is where conspiracy comes in, and it's tough.
How would you explain it? Like there's a different dimensions, or like you have two separate, like you have a whole nother life going in like a different dimension. Mm-hmm. There's a whole nother Heather doing something.
No, there's a lot of theories on that. That I don't know. What I do believe is when we see things we can't explain, like ghosts are always iridescent, or when people are seeing these orbs or these aliens or these werewolves, I think it's like a TV channel. When you remember the old ones from the 80s, you would like turn it and it would be fuzzy, and then you would turn it and it would get a little bit clear. That's kind of what it's like to see into other dimensions. In my opinion, from what the research I've done, is like this world we see through such a narrow glass, like we see things just from our perspective. But I believe there's stuff all around us, you know? And that would be like the tuning in. And apparently you can tune in, but there's stuff that's kept from us because people like to control that information. That's the idea. Now, I don't know if that's true. And it's hard to talk about this stuff because I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, because some of this is very real. And I think it's really important that it gets taken seriously.
So I saw this girl on TikTok.
I love your TikTok.
And she's like a woman, like, you know, around my age, whatever.
Okay.
And she goes, all right, I'm going to tell you this story. And she's like, there was this kid in kindergarten named Steve Anderson or something. And his name was Steve Anderson. And I left and went to another school. Then he went to that, and like he followed her in all these different schools. And they were just like, and she's like, oh, that's so weird. But they went from like New York to Chicago to Connecticut to whatever. Then she's in college, like doing Europe. And they're supposed to go on this pub crawl, like with this host. The host doesn't show up. They decide to do their own, and they go to this weird underground bar, whatever. And who shows up at the guy? And it's like, how is this guy keep showing up from all these different parts of my life? Now she's in her 40s or whatever, and she's at work. And her coworker is engaged to him.
Like, and they jumped multiple states?
Yes. And then she goes, okay, now I'm going to film something without my family knowing what is going on.
Okay.
So she is filming her husband in the morning. She's like, hey, good morning. She goes, hey, when we rented that house, who owned it? And he goes, the Andersons, this other house. And she goes, and when we bought this house, what was the name of the owner of this house? And he goes, Anderson. Then she goes to her son and she goes, remember your imaginary friend when you were little? And he goes, yeah. And she goes, what was his name again? He goes, Anderson.
Wild.
And I was just like, and so some people thought maybe the Steve Anderson guy and her parents were both in the CIA or something. That was the only other thing that would make sense other than this being just way too fucking weird of a coincidence. But it still doesn't make sense why he ended up at that bar.
See, I don't think there are coincidences. That's where kind of my paranormal mind comes in. In my opinion, that could be a pre-life where he was very much involved in her life, because we take the same people with us as we reincarnate, I believe.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know for a fact. Nobody does.
Yeah.
But we take the same people with us and they come in different forms. So that could have been a father figure before. That could have been a child before. And they want to stay in touch somehow on some level, you know, because our spirit just enters new bodies as it comes and goes. And that happens a lot. If like there's children who are only 4 years old, they can remember the house they lived in, what their name was, and then parents will go look, and sure enough, in the 1920s, some man named Melvin whatever lived on this street in LA. And there's like people have recordings of like little kids saying stuff. It's wild. So I do think there are no synchronicities. For example, 3223 are two numbers that have always been significant in my life. Your room is 232, which I've no surprise, but like you're the only Bravo podcast I really listened to. Yeah. And I thought it was interesting that I asked to come to your podcast.
Yeah.
And you were 232. I was like, oh yeah, of course she's 232. And then Heather and I, this is when I knew we were BFFs, was we have the same 4-digit code on our phone, and it is those number sequences. And I was like, what are the freaking odds we would have the same 4-digit code? Like, there's probably thousands of 4-digit codes. So I think weird synchronicities like that.
I think when you make yourself aware of it,
it does manifest more.
It totally manifests more.
I agree.
And I also think it can work with, you know, people who have passed. Like I remember I was at like a girls' weekend, and I told the story that I love about my dad that he would absolutely love. Okay.
Yeah.
So I tell the story about my dad, and then I go to the spa. Such a girl story, but I go to the spa, and she's like, "Oh, I'll take you to your locker," and the locker was 34, and that was my dad's number for football.
Oh,
but that is what he used for every bank code, everything.
Oh,
it was always 34,
gosh.
34, 34, 34, 34. And like right then, it's like,
you're number 34.
That story. Yeah, and I just was talking about him. And it was like he would have absolutely loved that story because it was super interesting and super flattering to his life, and that he would be impressed that I remembered it. And so I'm like, I literally think he was sitting watching us and then was like, made that happen so that, send her to locker 34.
Well, numerology, like the more you look into numerology, it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Like how there's like a sacred geometry and sacred geometry, and how numerology is actually really a thing.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. So if I ever did reality TV again, it would probably be in the paranormal space.
Yeah.
I would love to interview, because I've hosted television before.
Yeah.
I would love to go interview people who have evidence of paranormal experiences. That would be cool. That's something I'm kind of working on.
Cool. Yeah, I love that for you.
We'll see.
I love that for you.
I love that for me. 32. Now I got to go change all my passwords.
Yeah.
That's not going to work anymore.
And mine are not 34.
Okay,
Those were my dad's, and he is in heaven. Thank you so much, Angie. This was super fun. I'm so glad we got to know each other.
I know. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.